Everyone, welcome. Today we are doing our first episode of the Turner Boys. Pretty much we got Darian, my dad, Chad Turner, and we are going to be rolling through a few questions that you guys asked us. So earlier today I had a Snapchat that I put out, and pretty much what was said was, are there any questions or any topics that you guys want us to cover when it comes to, like, I guess a podcast sense or any sort of just talking or discussion sense? And one of my friends said divorce. So I figured, why not do that? Why not talk about divorce? I have parents who divorced. Obviously, Darren does too, and my dad did as well. So I figured that if we could all come from a position in the sense that, yeah, like we all have divorced parents, we could all discuss it in a way that maybe somebody who doesn't have divorced parents or is going through a divorce may be able to see in a different light. And potentially give you guys some insight on what it's all about. So I guess the way I want to intro this one is giving the mic to my dad and trying to see what his idea of divorce is and how he thinks it goes about.
Thank you. I grew up and did the divorce thing as well with my parents, but I think just in a very general sense, before I give my opinion on divorce, is I'll give my opinion on love. It's very difficult, and it's very difficult for us all to continue to grow together. I think that we grow apart, and then we grow back together, and we grow apart. And if we grow apart, and that ends in divorce, that doesn't mean that's a negative. That just means that that piece of our love tree is done. And now we got to find somebody else in our life that brings us that same amount of love. But when we look at divorce in a general sense, it's always looked at very negatively, as if it's an ending, especially when there's kids involved. When there's kids involved, nobody wants to hear that my two parents don't love each other anymore. And here's the other thing too, and I think that you guys know this, and I don't mind being a little personal, but you guys understand that I still love your mom as much as I did way back when. It's the same love, it just isn't romantic love. And so because it ain't romantic love doesn't mean that things are broken, it just means that we are now co-parenting in a way that is not under the same roof. And so I have a very difficult time with people looking at divorce negatively. I think that we should look at love in a way that has a timetable that for some people it can last a long time, and for some people it's a very short time. And we like to have that very strong bond of saying we're married and having that union. And just because we break that union doesn't mean that that's a negative thing. That just means that we've grown a little bit further apart. So just in a very general sense, and I don't know, Gavin, if I answered that question, but I just wanted to speak to the general sense of divorce and what that means to me.
Yeah, of course. But in speaking in the general sense, right? So there's 50% of our population in the U.S. is divorced. So obviously it's a pretty renowned thing. Like most people are doing it nowadays, or at least 50%. What would you say to somebody that goes down the stereotypical love, death till marriage, whatever it may be? I am with you till the end of time, whether that be happy or sad.
Well, I think that the problem with me, being 50 and looking at, you're influenced by your parents a lot, and you're influenced by the social influence of those around you. And I think that if it were for me, and so to answer your question directly, Gavin, if somebody said they wanted to get or get married and they're going to be in love for the rest of their life, I wouldn't frown upon that. I would say good luck to you. I think that's a great goal to have, But I think that when I'm a logical person, or at least I become more of a logical person over my life. And so when I look around me and I say, okay, in my 50 years, have I seen more people that have been able to obtain that? Not just not just people that have been married for long periods of time, but that they've been married for a long period of time and have success, meaning they're happy. And I haven't seen a lot of that. And so when I look around and say, is that the right move? I say that that's a tougher move. And so maybe that's part of my weakness. One out of every 10 people I see shows some success in that death till part long-term stuff and marriage and things of that nature. And I'm not opposed to marriage either, but I think that that gives me a little pause, because I have a lot of other data that says that things fail in shorter intervals.
Okay. Dan, what would you say divorce did for you? Like, how did it affect you in the sense of like you growing up? Because I know for me, it was harder not necessarily in the physical sense. I know I was always bringing stuff back and forth to the house, but I'm saying in a mental sense, like how did it affect you first when they first split up and as we grew up later on?
That's actually a good question because I actually wasn't affected at all. Like not even a little bit. Because I was a little confused when I was a little kid because I was like, what's going on? I think the transition was amazing, and I think I got to know both of them a lot more as parents because they were separate and they were trying to do their own thing as parents. So the question I have for you, Sir Papa, is what do you think is the best way to transition your kids from a married, loving home to a single parent lifestyle?
I think it's the way that I try to tell you guys all the time. That's the big win when it comes to relationships in general, which is over communicate. And what I mean by that is I remember sitting with you guys in one of your bedrooms and talking about it and saying, hey guys, Papa ain't gonna be living here anymore. I'm gonna go somewhere else and live, but I'm still gonna love you all the same. My love won't change and your mother's love won't change. But people's love changed. And the same conversation I started off with, I had with you guys when you were 9 years old, 8 and 9 years old. I had the same conversation. Now, I don't think, the other thing I don't think that people do is I don't think they give their kids enough credit, meaning they think their kids can't handle it. Well, it's not that you want to lump on this big emotional burden for them, but you want to talk through it so that they understand it, so that later on when their subconscious mind starts to have questions about what the hell is going on here, it can be answered and filled in the gaps a little bit by the talk that we had in that one bedroom. But I remember it being just a very casual, like, here's how things are going to go from this point on. And again, I think that the one thing that I tried to do that I think that other parents should do is let you guys know I'm not going to stop loving you, and neither is your mom. And the love will be the same, but it's just going to be under two different roofs. And the roofs. I always say roof. But anyway, but I think that whenever you have these conversations and you talk about love, and anything that you want to talk to your kids about should be very transparent and open. And I think that, to answer your question, Darren, I think that that's what maybe helped your transition, or helped my transition for that matter. I think that when we're able to talk and have an open platform of communication about anything, then we have a better chance of success. When I say to you as a parent, or when I say to my ex-wife or anybody else, they're too young to be dealing with this, or this is too much for them, I think that's when we start to go wrong. It's not to present this as a burden, like, yeah, you guys got to deal with it. Me and your mom don't love each other anymore. It's how you present it, but just to tell everybody, hey, look, I still love you, she still loves you, and we're still going to get along and make sure that you guys are raised the best way that we can. And I think that if you have that, it makes the transition a little easier, in my opinion.
I remember it was like, when you were like first moving, you talked to us about, yeah, like life is going to be great. Like we're going to get a bike right on the beach. It's going to be like.
That was not the first convo though. The first convo was in bed.
No, I remember that one. Yeah. But initially it was weird because I don't.
Are you trying to say, Gavin, that you remember it being positive? Because I
don't remember it ever being negative initially.
But I'm saying that I colored up by saying we're gonna have a beach and bikes.
Yeah. I think that was like, I never saw it in the sense of it ever hurting me. Like I only saw it in the sense of like, oh, okay, like this is kind of weird at first, but like since he told me we're getting like a tricycle, not a tricycle, what the fuck is the name?
A tandem bike.
Tandem bike, yeah. Since we're getting a tandem bike, like it's gonna be lit. Like we're gonna have a great time, whatever. And that made it so much easier for me. But I just remember later on, like it started kicking in more. I guess whenever we first moved into the house, I think it was also when we got like cats. I don't know. It's really odd, but I'm saying like.
Oh, you're saying when we got the cats, it made it more family?
It was like a homey vibe, and it was like now splitting the two.
Because when you think about when we moved to the new place, it was just like.
It was like a vacation home. I don't know.
It was like a mattress, a couch, a TV, or something. It was very sparse. So yeah, I can see that. Well, there you go. If that's good advice for the parents. If you move, make sure that both of the units feel very homey, and for you attach that homey feeling to animals. to make it feel like home. So that's interesting.
I have actually like a weird question, but for you being in a divorce, is it? I mean, obviously I haven't been in a divorce, but is it much different than breaking up with someone like that you've been dating?
No, it's the exact same thing. The only difference
I'm
is
saying because
that
people think of it as like this massive thing
yeah,
that you.
that's
Like,
a good question. And when you're your age and you have to break up with a girl that you're just not connecting with anymore, and it's just not feeling right, and I'm feeling like we're growing apart. You know, when you're younger, it happens so much quicker. You know, we get irritated and we don't have the tools that we have when we get older, and so relationships happen very on and off very quickly. We're not as patient. And shoot, I lost the train of thought. What was the question?
it was talking about just the difference between a divorce and a
Yeah, but
date.
thank you. But it's the same thing in terms of, you know, whenever you break up with a girl at your age, you know, it's tough to do. It's you don't know if it's the right thing to do. You never know if it's the right thing to do. Whether it be breaking up with a girl, guy, or breaking up with or divorcing or anything of that nature, it never feels comfortable doing it. I mean, you always second guess yourself. And it's not like it's not instinct or logic or anything like that. I think it's just that for me, it's like when there becomes a pattern that I can't solve. Now, I have learned over the years that I can solve almost anything with open communication. So if I'm with a girl, I need to talk through some things. I don't like that toothbrush that you leave on the thing that drips down the side of the sink. I'm weird and it bothers me, and I am sorry for that bothering me the way that it does. But if there's a way that maybe you could just put it in there and then maybe flick me off afterwards, because do something like some other way of me getting through that so that my brain won't go so crazy, that would be fantastic. But if I talk through all the things that bother me, then I have this burdenless shell that I can give all my love to and receive the love, and then she can do the same. But I think that open platform, if I have that, and then I find it breaking down and I can't seem to bring it back. I can't seem to bring it back to a connection. I think that's when two people start to grow apart. When they fail to want to get together and try to communicate, that's when you have to make that move. You have to say, okay, well, maybe it's not our time in the marriage. Here's the other thing, and I tell this story a lot. There was a group I followed on PBS called the Loud Family. And the Loud Family, it was like a 70s reality show, like Kardashians of the 70s. And the Loud Family split up during the show. They were always angry. The mom and dad were always angry. It was like in Santa Barbara or somewhere out in California, in a beach town. And they were always upset at each other. And then they divorced after the show. One of their sons was gay and got AIDS and died. And when he died, his dying wish was for mom and dad to get back together. And so to present that dying wish, they said, well, let's give it a try. And they did, and now they've been together. He just died a few years ago, like 95. But they've been together forever. And so love doesn't mean, just because you guys say it isn't right anymore, let's split up, let's move to different houses, it doesn't mean that it's the end. One other piece of transparency, and your mom would probably kill me for all this information, but one other piece of transparency, just to show you that things aren't always the end. You know, when me and her split up and we went under different roofs, the one piece that maybe you guys understand and maybe you didn't is we would drive back and forth to each other's houses and had another love flame for probably 6 months after that we were trying to work things out, and things were in certain ways going well, you know, because you have a little more separation, a little more time to think. And so, and it didn't happen to work out, but I'm saying, just because you break up with a girl or just because you get a divorce doesn't mean it's forever, I guess is my end point. It means that it could always get back together as you guys find common ground and you start to grow again together.
I guess that's in the same point as, I know, I mean, talking about like Christy and your relationship, I remember that you and Jamie were always talking together. To give this podcast kind of a background, Christy was my dad's old girlfriend, and Christy and Jamie had a kid together. So it's not technically marriage, but they're exes, yada, yada. So I know that you guys were very open, but it was obviously very different with like you and Mama. And there was that big conflict in the house of not even transparency, just being able to talk to each other and see each other again. And I guess the real question is like, what would you say to any family or any parents who no longer want to speak to each other, but they still have a child relationship in the middle?
It's a good question, very tough for me to answer, but I'll answer in both platforms. I think when you look at the way that me and Jamie, when me and Christy first got together, and we were together for 8 years and had a great relationship as well, but when we first got together, me and Jamie became friends instantly. Well, how is that? We did the same thing that I say, every relationship requires over communication. And so I'm going to be helping father his child, and I'm with his ex-girlfriend, and there's a trust factor that needs to happen. And how do I build that trust? We need to talk. So me and Jamie talked a lot. We talked a lot. And our bond was sports. We talk about sports, but it was a way for us to at least bond on something. And then it got to be we would meet for coffee and talk about other things. And then we just became really good friends. And we met out in Vegas and had a great, weekend hanging out with each other. So I think it's just over communication. So that's that platform. And then when you look at the way that I am with your mother and Christian, we don't have that same thing. And why is that? Because I think what happens, and now I'll answer your question, but I think that what happens is if you don't start the relationship off good, meaning if me and Christian and Mama would have talked more right away, it wouldn't have gotten to the point of weirdness that it is now. Meaning, now it's like weird to even talk because it's been so many years that we haven't all communicated in a way that is functional, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that that's where we went wrong. Had we started it communicating more and talking to each other more, and it's just all our fears. It's our conflict fears. I don't want to talk to Christian. He doesn't want to talk to me. I don't want to talk to my children. And if we would learn to break through that at the beginning, I think that we could have, all three of us, had a much better time in terms of communicating what it is that we wanted out of the two of you. But what was the direct question that I didn't answer? Or did I answer it? Advice for people that have parents that aren't talking. And I know that growing up, and I won't mention names, but I remember a lot of your friends had a similar scenario where their parents were always at each other's throats.
Just like angry at each other. Yeah.
I think that, what I think that, and I'll put this on the children just as a way, it's hard to bridge the gap. And whenever I'm a child and I've got two dads or two moms and I've got to connect the two of them, I as a child can request certain things. And I as a child want to see this happen. And I as a child want to make sure that we all have a meeting, a family meeting together as a group at a very casual place, like some sort of restaurant or a coffee shop. And we all get together and we talk about if we're all on the same page about growth and about education and about sports and about any of this stuff. And I think that if the child does that, it's hard for the parents to say, I ain't doing that. Well, why not? Because I ain't doing that. Well, I know why. I want that as a child. I want my parents to all help me grow. I just ain't doing it. I mean, that still may be the case, but it's hard to tell a kid no. It's hard to tell a kid no. So I think if the kid takes upon themselves, no matter how young they are, to say, I would like for all of us to get together and talk about what the family unit's going to be going forward, even if they spit out that one sentence, I think that will help for those parents that, like me and your mom, that aren't able to get together and have this union. I think it'll start the dialogue and it'll help them in the long run, the child in the long run.
Cool. So I was just going to segue just a little bit. Darian, how much easier do you think it is with divorced parents to use scapegoats or like any sort of like dividing tactic? What me and you used to go back and forth to houses depending on which parent was like not treating us better, but like gave us the benefit of the doubt. So what is your take on that? Like, is it much easier or does it not make a difference?
I would say just as the parent to never lose that balance of like, if you have like a weekly system going like Friday to Friday, never let that go out of balance, or balance will start to go out of place, and then those scapegoat things will start to happen. But besides that, I mean, it usually doesn't really happen because there's some clear grounds when you're at a certain parent's house. But yeah, parents love you like as much as you can possibly think, and if you just talk to them about it, you can clearly get to some common ground. I think the problem comes in when you don't talk about it, and then you start thinking about yourself, and then you have all this built-up anger, and then it just goes to shit, to be honest.
Okay. Um,
Oh, wait, I got a question now.
yeah.
What do you think about parents now saying that they won't discipline their kids? Like they're like, "Oh, you would hit your kids." Like, where do you think this is gonna take kids down the road when they're not getting disciplined for things they do?
when I look back at the way I used to discipline you guys, and I was, the one thing I always tried to, smack the crap out. No, the one thing I used to always try to do with you guys is to be consistent. If my behaviors are consistent, no matter how young you were, you understood the consequence of behavior. And so when you would act bad and I would say, don't do that again, you knew that I didn't say 1, 2, 3, or I didn't say, you do that again. Like, I never went down that path. I would just say, don't do that again. And then usually you would test the boundary and you would do it again. And I'd take you and I'd take you in the bathroom and spank your butt. And then you would cry, and then I'd wait until you were done crying and bring you out there, bring you back into where we were at. And if you did it again, I'd say, don't do it again. And then we'd probably run that back and forth a few times. But I think that, and I don't know if that was the right thing to do. I think that there has to be something that for the child to understand is being something he doesn't like. Does a spank on the bottom, did it do that for you when you were that age? I don't know. That's a tough one to really unwrap. I think that there has to be something. And I as a child, I know that you don't want to get your butt smacked, so maybe that does it. But would it have been the same had I brought you in there and talked to you about it? I don't know. Maybe not. It's tough. It's tough. So, but then the question is, well, where does that stop? Am I just allowed to smack you upside the head? Like, is that okay? Or, like, is it butt only? Or like, what's okay? And I think that that's where it becomes a tough one because, every family historically, generationally has a way that they've disciplined their kids. And it's hard to judge others because, I was spanked with a belt or with a switch or with a paddle or, this is how I was done and I'm going to make sure my kids are the same way. And so I don't know if it was right or wrong, but I guess if I had to do it all over again, I probably would be the same way. I would be consistent, a smack in the butt so that there was at least, I'm sure, a slight bit of pain so that you would say, I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah. The thing I wanted to move into is with that whole separation thing, I guess you see like a very big separation in motherly and fatherly qualities. Like I remember we had a conversation previously. We talked about like how when we came to your house, it was more about discipline. Like the first thing you wanted out of us was to be like men by the time we left your house. But with mom, it was completely different. Like with mom, it was, how are we going to make you the best you can be? Like, what can I do to help you? It was more like motherly traits. But I think, to be honest, not to say that it's the biggest fault of divorces, but it's very hard when you don't have the same messages coming at you to kind of like get in your head. You're
I think what
sort of lost.
Is just what you were alluding to earlier. I think that when that occurs, you guys just find the easiest way out. I used to try to keep you guys in sports. I grew up in sports, doing every single sport, every single season, all the way up until I was in high school, and still did in high school some sports. But when I would try to get you guys, sports sucks, man. It sucks. You got to compete. You got to push yourself. You got to work hard. You got to do all these. You got to be disciplined. And all that, those things occur, and that becomes a negative to a child unless he doesn't have a choice, and then he just fights through it. And I wanted that to be a learning lesson. And your mom said, I don't understand it. They're not going to be professional sports people. And that wasn't against what your mom was doing right or wrong. But what
the hell is that? What the hell is that parenting?
I give you
professional sports players. Get the hell out of here. How do you know?
Well, I know, but I'm saying but again, I'm speaking from my experience, and I'm a boy, and you're a boy, so it's easier. She didn't grow up, and people in her household didn't play sports, so she's not wrong.
But it's funky out here. Oh my God, I'm gonna show you some weight out here.
What is it?
No,
we got the Pop-Tarts a little sooner.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Shit, bro.
But I think that it's like I think it's tough. I think that goes back to not being on the same page. And so there you go. Maybe that's something that the parents can learn. when you're two are not on the same page. And being on the same page doesn't mean being in agreement. If we were talking all the time and we sat down and said, I really want them to play sports, and you guys were around, and she was like, I don't think they should be professional athletes, and say, well, I want them to learn discipline and teamwork, and I want them to learn all these skill sets. And the other thing is I want them in some sort of organization rather than going home and playing games all day, or something like that. Or what's the alternative to that kind of feel?
Yeah.
And if we were talking through it, maybe she would have understood me better. And then she would say, I know, but I just don't want them to break a leg. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. Or I've read that the football helmet isn't big enough that they're getting brain injuries. Okay, I got you there. So maybe no football, but maybe in soccer, maybe in basketball, maybe there's some others, but again, more communication would have helped that. But instead, the child, you all became in control. And what we all do as human beings is we choose the path of least resistance. And what you all chose was none of the above. Don't go to school if I can get away with it. Don't do sports if I can get away with it. You guys would choose the path that was, and you guys both turned out just fantastic. So it didn't have an impact, but I'm sure it has some impact. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I think that it just goes back to there needs to be some communication so that the child isn't raising himself.
I remember probably the most heated fight you and I have ever been in was, I don't know if you remember this.
I could tell you before you even finish.
Okay.
There's only one fight that I
What are you saying?
Huh?
What fight? What?
There was only one time that me and Kevin got into the fight, and Darian indirectly caused it, and he didn't even realize.
Yeah. That's my dog.
But since this is a podcast, I don't know if I get into the whole story, but.
We're back. Intermission.
Oh yeah. Wait. First, finish your fight, and then I'll ask.
I was talking to Gavin about that. I just don't know if there's any benefit to the story in terms of two others.
Pretty much, we just got in a fight, and it was strictly because our parents didn't communicate. That was pretty much the gist of the story.
Yeah. You tried using she said, and that's where it goes wrong. I've seen it now with Peanut, and that doesn't work.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think our biggest fight came from the fact that you were playing both sides well, and you were like, Mom said this, and you said that, and you were able to find. But again, you were finding outs because your parents weren't communicating, and so that's a real good point. Our biggest fight came from lack of parent communication. Had we been communicating, I called her up and said, hey, did you say you don't want him going, and why do you think that way, and what do you think it's in his best interest for, and we could have talked it out. So yeah, that's a good point.
I was fat, right? How did you know, like, if I was gonna make it out of it and like not be fat, and like how is the right way to be like, oh, eat healthy, but at the same time not make me be like, oh, why the fuck am I so fat? Why don't call me fat?
Yeah, and Mama just straight called me fat.
What was the right way to transition?
How did
you know I was not gonna be fat? How did you know I was gonna be fucking?
But I didn't. From my standpoint, I never cared either way. I'm saying, like, I think that fat, being overweight is unhealthy.
It could be healthy though.
Yeah, being overweight is unhealthy, and so I wanted you to be healthy. And so what could I control? You were just like any other kid. You were addicted to sugar, and
addictive as any other drug, for the record.
100%. And so when you were addicted to sugar and your body can't process all that sugar, it puts it right in the fat. And so you would just constantly find ways to get a hold of sugar. And I think that, and I think that from my standpoint, what I can control is cooking good food. So every time we had dinner, it was something that was healthy-ish that we could all sit down and eat together. Let me throw one other segue there. I think the most important part of parenting, the most important part, if I had to do it all over again, the two things, I know you do, but the two things that I feel I did well that allowed us to create this kind of unit that we have now, that we're able to have these open is we had dinner every night together.
I was just gonna say that.
We had dinner every night together, and we sat around and we talked about issues of our day and things that happened, and that's important. And the other piece that I remember it being a big part of our growth is the car ride to school. It took us 20 minutes, and we wouldn't do it with the radio on. We would do it with a conversation to school for 20.
Howard Stern sometimes, not gonna lie.
Yeah, that's true.
Actually, like low-key 50%, but still.
Yeah.
No, but the dinners were such an essential point, not even just for like, I guess it was on top of it being a point where we could all discuss what we did with each other. It was a point where we could all just open up in the sense of like we are all in a kind of safer environment, even if like I remember you talked to us about how this world is a very hard and lonely place for anyone, and for like though not even those dinners, but just for our house to be an environment where it's kind of a sense of escapism in the sense that you can just get away from all the craziness and get into a place where like everyone is in somewhat agreement and somewhat acceptingness of what we're all about. And like, to me, that was the biggest part.
It's because of you guys that I came up with the thing called for you, it was the 20 count. And I said, when you go out into the world and you leave this house, there's going to be 20 things that are going to happen to you that you're not going to like. Other kids are cruel. They're going to say something to you. They may push you. A teacher may laugh at you. And all these things are going to happen to you every day. And as adults, we get less of them because adults are a little more, they're not as mean as kids are. As kids, we have defense mechanisms, fight or flights that kick in that make us say and do things that aren't nice. But, you know, there's things that happen in your day that there's challenging. There's conflict. When you walk out of your home, it's war. There's people out there that are, you know, after theirs. And in terms of you having a good chance of survival in this nasty world, what I used to try to get across to you guys is when you're at home, this is about love and about refueling. This is like, you know, filling that tank up and making sure that it's all full so now you can go back out there. And then you come back in and you're all bruised and you got your cuts and your legs all screwed up. And I'm making a metaphor physically, but you're screwed up. And then you get home and then we repair through dialogue and through open communication and through love. And then once you get all that done in the morning, we do it again. And each time you go out, I think that was important. I think that if the house is not a place of love and the house is a place of conflict, makes life tough. I'm on edge all the time. If conflict is at home and conflict is in the real world, my happiness factor is going to go way down.
Yeah. Question. All right, so you have two parents, right? And one has a different way of trying to raise their kid, but then you introduce the way to the other parent, and they're like, "No, I don't agree." Like, how do you go about it when, like,
and from a child standpoint or from an adult, like you're saying,
from your adult standpoint, how do you go with your partner when they don't agree about a certain way of raising your kid, and how do you come to that common ground?
When two people are married.
And they're trying to like you know, give different tactics about how they should raise their kid, and they're like, no, I don't agree with that.
Well, I think that in general it just has to be compromised. I think that it's never going to be, you know, that was the benefit that I had in raising you guys is I didn't have to compromise. I didn't. You know what I'm saying? I could raise you exactly how I wanted to when you were under my roof, you know. But I think that when two people are living together, whether it be in marriage or not, but I think when two parents are living under the same roof, they have to have open dialogue about it. And sometimes, and the worst thing that my parents' generation did is they did it behind closed doors. You know, they fight over things behind closed doors. But for me, it's you bring the kids in. This is a family unit. I know, but they're 4, they're 5. I don't care. They're 4 and 5. They need to be involved in the decision-making process so that when they're 7 and 8, they'll be better. And so when they're 9 and 10, they'll be better. And when they're teenagers and out of the household, they'll be better. And so I think that when I say I think they should play sports at a dinner round table, you know, we're sitting at dinner and mom says that we're going theoretical here as if we're together. And mom says, I don't think they should play sports. They're not going to be pros. And I say, well, that's not how I look at it. This is the way I look at it. And she says, I know, but this is the way I look at it. And then I say, kids, how do you look at it? What are your thoughts? And you say, you know, and I don't know. I just don't want to do it. I don't think it's fair. I don't like getting my head bashed in. But whatever your move is, we talk through those things. But some of them, I'm going to get what I want out of your growth, and some of them I'm not. And it's all good. It's all good. But where the growth comes from is the open dialogue. Where the growth comes from is you having the ability to speak on what you feel, and me doing the same, and your mom doing the same, and Gavin doing the same. I think that's where the beauty of it comes from. Where we go wrong is when we shut down and we're in disagreement on something, which means we talk less. So when there's conflict, we got to keep fighting through it. Not fighting, but fighting through it. Talking, more talking. Civil talk, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I don't really know much about marriage, don't get me wrong, but like I feel like
you've been with
I
girls.
feel like- I
Between
feel
marriage
like-
and being with a girlfriend.
no, at least when I'm in a relationship or when I was with what's her face, I feel like it was better to fight, not fight, but like talk through things rather than like just leaving them alone. Because like I feel like it's almost like work, like anything else. And I feel like if you don't talk through it and you just like leave it, then you'll just come into like huge issues. You guys will just like resent each other, and then that's when you get into issues and you just start to like drift away. But like I feel like at least if you're fighting about it, and then you don't have to come into like you don't have to agree with each other, but you have to respect the other person's opinion. And I feel like at least if you do that, you go to bed knowing like you got everything out. But like I feel like if you just leave it, then
It's called having subconscious burden. So you're like, what, why are you doing that? Like, I don't know, why are you doing that? And you guys get in this big fight, like whatever. And then you go your separate ways and you don't work through the problem. And working through the problem doesn't mean coming up with a solution. Working through the problem means putting in some work, debating, talking, discussing, understanding. So when you're doing all those things, you're working towards a common ground, even though it's not the same. It's just a common understanding of each other. But when you stop doing that and you start to go, whatever, girl, see you later. She goes her way and you go your way. What happens is you don't realize this, but you put a burden on your subconscious mind. And then you do that a few times and you can't figure out why I'm irritated and depressed and anxious and I blow up. Whatever, get the fuck out of here. I just blow up and I don't know why. And it's the next day or it's 2 days later. And I don't know why I'm feeling this negative energy. But why you are is because you trap these subconscious burdens inside of you that need it out. And they come out in the worst ways. So the goal in life is to have a burdenless shell, is to have no burdens. Now that's impossible to do. But what you should at least do is be aware of the fact that when a burden is coming into me, I don't want that. So let's talk. Now, you don't just you're never going to get the resolve. So you just don't want to talk until there's an answer. You just want to talk enough.
at least have respect for the other person's opinion, because like especially it's harder when you're like as old as you are. But I'm saying like at least for me, like I'm trying to like
I know. I was like, man, you're old as fuck.
No. That wasn't. No, I meant to say like I'm like only 18, but like even being 18, like when a girl comes into my life, this girl's also 18, and we've been raised for 18 years like straight, like differently, and then we're like coming together and trying to like be like perfect and like have like the same morals. We're acting like we're raised the exact same way, and we're not. So like
I used to have a rule of thumb called 51%. And what I meant by that is when I'm with a girl, 51% of the time I want to be happy with her. And I know that, and I won't mention the name, it was a friend of mine, be like, I'm 99. Are you kidding me? 99. Like, okay, man. I'm saying if you're looking for perfection, you're going to fail because, like you said, we've been raised a certain way and we've grown in a certain way, opposite of each other. And now here it is. We're now connecting. But yet we've spent X amount of years to get to this point that is different. And if I am at least, if it's 49, I got to question whether this relationship is the right relationship. If I'm unhappy, more than I'm happy, every night I come home and see her, then I have to question the relationship. We're growing apart. And there comes a certain point of growing apart where it becomes unhealthy for the both of you, and it's time for you to find new loves. But choose whatever number you want. That number should be somewhere north of 50 and somewhere south of 75 at the very, very most. And if you're getting along that amount of time, but you have differences that you can't understand each other on, that's okay. And you don't have to solve the world in a day. You discuss some things that you want that day, and a week later, you talk about it again. I want to talk a little bit more about that one topic. I know that it was a topic that irritated the both of us, but let's talk through some more stuff. And the problem with relationships is we don't put in the work. We don't put in the work. You gotta put in the work. It's like everything else. You go to work and you work your ass off. Then you come home and you're like, give me a beer, turn the game on, shut the fuck up. I'm not allowed to say that on this podcast. But that's the move. Is what we want to do. Is I don't want to work, but when you come home, you got to work too. I got to work on this relationship. This is minute one, day one of my new job, and that starts at 6:01 or whatever time I enter the door. And if you put in the work in the relationship, you'll be happier in your relationship.
Facts. Last point I'm going to make. So for our situation compared to yours, we always talk about how like the differences in income levels could have a very different approach on how you not necessarily parent someone, but how someone is raised. And for us coming from a high income household, we always talk about how we're kind of in the worst position in succession when it comes to, yeah, this person has had everything given to them, so the odds of them making it are slim to none, while the person who had probably less than us or had nothing has more of a desire to get to something, so therefore they're going to make it. But as far as a parenting standpoint, how do you think that it goes differently when it comes to someone who is raised in a low income to a high income household?
I think when you're in a high income household, the good thing that comes from a high income household is you're able to afford better schooling, and better schooling gives you a better network. If I get older and my friends, the president of this or the CEO of that or this and that, I can connect and I will have a better chance of success in whatever business that I have potentially. And so that network is strong, and that's something that you guys, having gone to university school and whatever other colleges you go to after this, those are strong ways of advancing in an easier way, for lack of a better way of saying it. I think that when you're in low income household, what you understand that you guys don't is the power of the dollar. You understand when you're in a low income household how much everything really costs. Like, hey, can I go get a basketball? Like, no. When I would ask for things from my mom, we grew up in a single household. My mom was a nurse making $25,000 a year. When we wanted a basketball, we'd have to ask for her birthday. It was like a $50 basketball. Like, we knew that though. We got our clothes from a thrift store. I don't know what you guys, through a Salvation Army type.
Yeah.
So we went shopping. So we understood the value of the dollar a little better than somebody that is from a high income household. And so I think that there needs to be, I guess the advice would be, when you're from a high income household, you need to try to find ways to teach your children the value of the dollar. And when you're in a low income household, you need to teach your children the value of networking. And that network doesn't have to be just in your current network. It can at least be the value of connecting with people that are on a positive path, connecting with people around you that want to go for higher education or that want to strive for better things and that aren't doing drugs and getting messed up in different stuff. Like, if they're going down a bad path, that's going to be a bad network. You're still part of a network. It's just a negative network. And so if I can follow a positive network, I can build on that, and those people can become just as valuable as your school kids were.
Cool. I am pretty much done with questions if anybody else has anything else.
Darren?
I got so many fucking questions. I'm ready now. What's it called? Saying you came from a low income household and growing up to what you have now, and there's definitely been times you balling with the money, you know what I mean? You live in the Porsche. But looking back now, do you like being at your age, do you think it was more important to go for a more money-based job or something that you loved, and you think you'd be more happy right now if you were doing something else?
It's a real good question. I mean, there's studies on it. Affluence is a word that means a certain, you've reached a certain dollar amount that your happiness factor tears off. It goes up, your happiness factor goes up, and I think it's like 75 or 80 grand. And then after that, it still goes up, but just barely, all the way up until like $1 million a year. Like, it doesn't go up very much. And now, if you take that same line, that same path, and now you overlay debt on top of it, and with more money comes more problems, so more stuff. I got bigger houses, I got bigger cars, but my happiness factors are going up. That means I got more problems that are occurring and less happiness. So I think it's just having the right mindset, just at least understanding the principles of that. It helps, because for me growing up, I chased the dollar like everybody else, and like you said, like you were inferring, like, I had nice things, and then, and there's been plenty of heartache that we all have in terms of business people out there that, you have good moments of making money and bad moments of making money, but it's all irrelevant to happiness. So it depends on what your goal is. If your goal is happiness and you think that buying all these things is going to make you happy. It won't. It won't. And I can tell you, I've been very, very high income, and I've been very low income, and I've had more happiness the lower income that I've earned. I think that somewhere in the middle is right. I think that if you realize that happiness is an internal struggle and not an external accomplishment, I think that that's where you'll start to win. You know, some of the things that I teach you guys in terms of, you know, physical health, mental health, those are where you win. You know, if I'm getting up and I'm working out and I'm eating right and I'm meditating and I'm doing those types of things, I'm going to have the best chance of success. If I lost my job and would have lost my job last year and I would have been a bagger at Publix, I can still find happiness there. I got to do the same principles. I got to be the best bagger at Publix. I got to be the best at whatever I'm trying, at least striving to be the best at whatever it is I'm trying to do. And I think that the process of trying to become the best bagger is where the joy comes from, is where the happiness comes from. I know that you can only afford one sub a day, which is a true story in my lifetime, or you live in a house in the hood. True story about my lifetime. So there's things but that's all relative. Again, if I look back on the one sub a day living in the hood, those are my happiest days of my life. And so it's all perspective. It's just all perspective. And when we understand it's about the process and not about the stuff. Because once you get this stuff, it lasts for about 5 minutes, and then you want more stuff. And then it lasts for about 5 minutes, and you want more stuff. And so it's not that it's wrong to have nice things. It's just it has to be internally, it has to be the right perspective in order for you to enjoy those things.
I don't know. I just feel like it would be a lot different if I was like in like a lower income like household.
Yeah, I think when you're lower income,
I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I'm saying now, like, being like grown up and stuff. I'm saying like, I'm saying like, would you change your job? I'm saying like, knowing now, like, would any other job like make you happier? That's what I'm saying. Like,
100%.
I'm saying like you know what I'm saying? Like you were raised in a lower income, so you're like chasing the dog. But I'm saying now, looking back, you're like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing.
Happy.
Being a business owner, I get the chance to express my creativity. I realize now at 50 that that's what brings me joy, is my creativity. And so when you think about creative, you think about the arts, you know, and there's certain things that I enjoyed about the arts. And if I would have went back in time and found that one place, and I probably described this story to you guys before, but if I went back to that one place in time where I wish I would have went for it and had the courage to go for it, I would have went after something that I enjoyed doing and not something that brought me money. And that would have been, you know, instead of, what was that, 1990, instead of calling Def Jam in 1990 and trying to get a jacket and then hanging up and realizing, man, I want to go work for those guys. And I don't know if Rick Rubin and them were in the dorms at that point, but probably still in NYU. I would have drove out to New York and told Rick I wanted to, you know, make coffee for him the way that Sean Combs did, and would have, you know, went that route. A love of music. I would have went that route, and I would have. I'm not saying I would have been any happier now. It's still the process. That first initial thrust into that musical environment would have made me happy, and then I would have had problems with bills and problems with relationships and problems with artists, and the same things would have occurred that happen to me now. It's employees and money now. It's all the same in the end, but when you're doing something, when you're in the environment of music versus the environment of mortgages, maybe there would have been a little bit of a happiness factor that would have benefited me.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like, especially when you're working that hard and like always chasing money, like you don't have any time to like build those like relationships with other people, like anyone to share with and like have those moments with.
Yeah, I think you have to find the right balance. I certainly do. Yeah, I think you have to find.
Like when you were saying like, oh, my happiest times were like, you know, when I was in the hood with my sub, because I'm saying like, yo, you're with your boy, you're with Troy, you know, talk about life, like what you want to do, and I'm saying like if you're just like stressed out all the time about like, you know, like I don't know. You see where I'm going?
I mean, me and Troy had our own stresses that, you know, we were sitting in Fifth Ave, but you're right, making pasta at,
with
you know,
boys, you know, talking
50
shit.
cents, making, you know, jumping up on a counter and we would talk kitchen talks for 3 hours, the same way that we do our dinner talks, you know, and that dialogue of life and trying to figure life out. You're certainly right. It was enriching to the point that I look back on it with a lot of joy.
I feel like that's just, I don't know. I feel like if you're only worrying about, you know, just like working, you get back at 8 and you just like barely like eat, and then you just go back to the grind, and then like you're getting all this money, but then it's just like you have no one to share with. You're not like talking shit with anyone because you're always like you're worrying about work. You just gotta go to work.
But I think that this is an important thing to consider. we are servicemen. We are here to service the world around us, and in doing so, we have a duty to our body. We were given a good body and a good mind, and we got to go out there and give it our all with what we've been given. And so when we go out there in the world, we got to go out there and go after it, whatever that it is. We go out there and get after it. And if during that process of going after it, we get money, so what? That isn't good or bad. That's just money, and we got to still maintain that same mental clarity to continue on the process of happiness, as opposed to it being, I've got to my goal, or if once I get to my goal, I'll then be happy. But I was discussing with Gavin earlier, where happiness comes from and where our successes come from is the amount of actions that we can group into one day's time. How many action points can I get in one day's time in order to have success? Gavin had mentioned that he wanted to go into real estate, and he had sent out a couple resumes to some people. And I said, you should do that. And I've discussed this with you too, Darren. You should do that 10 times every day. I know with the one guy called, it doesn't matter. He may work out, he may not. Call 10 more, have 10 more interviews, and keep that process going. More action items creates more benefit to you. And the goal should be, when I go to lay my head on the pillow, you know how you guys would feel when you had a long day at practice and you would take a shower and you get home and you just be like, God, I cannot wait to lay my head on that pillow and just relax. I'm exhausted physically. It's a lot easier to relate to physically. You should have that same physical and mental exhaustion when you lay your head on the pillow. Discipline equals freedom is the one that I've been repeating from Jocko and from Aristotle. But discipline equals freedom. If I'm disciplined throughout my day, from beginning to end, I have my best chance of freedom, mental freedom. Because as soon as I stop and don't create an action item, and take about an hour off or 2 hours off to play on my phone and shit like that, that's when I'm not happy. That's when depression and anxiety creeps in. So the more action items I can create, the more things that I can do in a day on my process of getting to freedom, the happier I'm going to be. And I'm going to crash my head on the pillow and be like, fuck yeah, I crushed it today. And so that should be your goal. That should be the goal. Tons of action items. Hopefully this video maybe will spark more questions from other people that they can get on and say, well, you guys talk about this. And I think that what everybody listening should understand is that everything's on the table. Nothing is off the table. We the three of us can talk about how it affects us from a parent level, kid level, and maybe it can help them out with things that they're thinking about but don't have anybody to talk to.
Okay. So like I said, this is our first episode, so we are trying to still grow the channel. Please be sure to subscribe. This is going to be called the Turner Boys. And yeah, I guess the last thing I'm going to say is follow me on IG, Gavin Turner 613. Follow my brother on IG, Darian Turner. Wait, do you have an underscore or something? Darian Turner underscore? Okay. And then, yeah, follow my dad on Facebook. That's the olden time. So be sure to like, comment, subscribe. And yeah, I don't know what our slogan is yet, but we will develop one. And we'll see you guys later. Peace.